This is Sarah Squires bringing you behind the headlines in today's edition of WyoToday Newsroom. Today, I am joined on the show by U.S. Representative Harriet Hageman. Welcome to the show.
Well, good morning, Sarah. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you.
Busy time up on Capitol Hill. Representative Hageman with this government shutdown that's dragged on here for what's sounds like the longest in U.S. history, but we may see a breaking point here. Can you tell us what's the latest going on in D.C. with the government shutdown?
So I arrived back in D.C. yesterday, and my understanding is that we are going to most likely start voting on the package sent to us by the Senate at about 4 o'clock this afternoon. So everybody is trying to make their way back to D.C. as quickly as possible. And I'm excited the fact that we're going to finally get this shutdown behind us. This was crazy from the beginning. I couldn't believe that this happened. But here we are 40-some days later, and hopefully we're going to get the government open so we can start paying our federal employees, our military personnel, and start providing the services that the American people deserve.
Now, can you kind of roll out a little bit about what's going into this deal, maybe where you see some compromise or room for improvement?
So this is essentially what has been on the table since the beginning, which is a clean CR, or a continuing resolution. And what that means is we will continue funding the government as we have for the last year. This is the same budget that we were under with Joe Biden. So we will continue to fund the government until January 30th, and this will allow us time to finish the appropriations process. This bill also included funding for certain agencies. So, in fact, we are going to be going forward with funding some of the agencies. We're going to be doing the Ag Appropriations Bill, the Legislative Branch Appropriations Bill, and MILCON, or Military Construction Appropriations Bills. So we have 12 appropriations bills that we are required to pass every year to fund various aspects of the government. By rolling that into the CR, we are actually going to be funding a substantial part or a substantial portion of the federal government all the way through September 30th of next year through the actual appropriations bills. So this can be a little bit complicated. Let me just say that the CR funds the entire government, and then 3 of the appropriations bills, whatever agencies that they cover, those agencies will actually receive funding for a full year. And then the other thing that we would be doing is extending the Ag bill for a full year. So the Farm Bill will also be funding for a full year. As so many of our farmers and ranchers have been asking me as I've been out in Wyoming is, when are you guys going to pass the Farm Bill? And it is reauthorized every 5 years. As part of this deal, we will be funding the Farm Bill. That includes SNAP. So this would include the SNAP funding, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance that has been so controversial over the last couple of weeks, as those funds have been unavailable because of the Democrat shutdown. So we will be funding that for a year. So what this does really is this hopefully will make it so that we don't end up in the same situation in January when we go forward with additional funding, because so much of the government will already be funded and they won't be able to hold us hostage.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that I think the Democrats have really framed this shutdown about has to do with the health care subsidies for the Affordable Care Act that are set to expire here on December 31st. Of course, those were kind of COVID era subsidies that were meant to expire here in 2025. And, I know a lot of numbers have been kind of thrown out there. We talked about one last time that you were on the show, and I think it's one that's really been sort of floated around as this big example here about these jaw-dropping increases. And so that is for a 60-year-old couple in Wyoming making $85,000 a year, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation. That would be the biggest increase, under this expiration of this subsidy. So that couple would be going from $602 a month to $4,777. That's a 693 percent increase. But I think that those numbers have really been used because they are the biggest. There's a tool where you can kind of go in and pencil around. So if you're talking about maybe a more moderate income couple, so a 35-year-old married couple working in Wyoming, making $60,000 annually, they would go from about their increases would be about 10% of their annual income. So they'd be paying about $2,500 a year. So that's quite a bit less than the example that we hear all the time. But I'm wondering, Representative Hageman, as you look at what these increases are going to do for some folks, I know, these subsidies are kind of across the board, and they are out there and available for people who are incredibly wealthy. But do you see changes that maybe need to be made for more moderate income families here in Wyoming?
So, Sarah, what you have just outlined is the complete failure of Obamacare, or the so-called Affordable Care Act. This is all because of Obamacare, every bit of what you're talking about. And in large part, a lot of it has absolutely nothing to do with the subsidies. So let's take a step back and look through history. The entire purpose of Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act at the time, was ostensibly to provide insurance for 20 million people out of 330 million people. What it ultimately did is break the insurance. It destroyed the health insurance industry and health insurance for all 330 million people. It's been an absolute failure, and until we recognize that and are willing to fix that underlying issue, these are the kinds of things that you're going to see, because it is the insurance companies that are raising those rates, and that has nothing to do with the subsidies, okay? Everybody needs to separate these things out. It is not because of whether there are subsidies available or not. The subsidies for anyone making 4 times or less the poverty level will continue. That is baked into that is baked into Obamacare. So if you are a family of 4 and you make $120,000 a year, you are still entitled to the subsidies because that was built into Obamacare. 3 years ago, the Democrats, without any Republican votes at all, decided that because of COVID, they were going to make it so that you could have unlimited income and you would be entitled to Obamacare subsidies. So you could be a millionaire. You could be a millionaire and you would be entitled to Obamacare subsidies. They only did that for 3 years, number one, because, again, it was a COVID-era subsidy, but also because at the time, if they had extended it beyond the 3 years, beyond December 31st, 2025, again, the Democrats are the one that put that deadline in place. If they had extended it beyond that time frame, it would absolutely have broken the bank. We're talking about as much as a $500 billion expense to continue the unlimited subsidies that the Democrats voted in 3 years ago, okay? So that's the situation. So you've got these subsidies for millionaires, but anyone making 4 times the poverty level or less will still continue to receive the subsidies. But the other thing that the Democrats did 4 years ago was, instead of sending that money to the individuals, to the insureds, to the individuals seeking the health care, all of that money went directly to the insurance companies, and it has created massive amounts of fraud, absolutely massive amounts of fraud. Now, what do I mean by that? Tens of billions of dollars have been paid to the insurance companies to provide absolutely no medical care whatsoever to the individuals that they insure. There are insurance companies that have been out there signing people up for Obamacare, and the people themselves don't even know that they're on it. They don't even know that they have been signed up for Obamacare and that they're on these rolls, because the insurance companies, through this fraud, have been receiving subsidies directly from the federal government. Tens and tens of billions of dollars of fraud have been paid to these insurance companies, and every one of them need to be investigated. I'm in the middle of this. I'm trying to get to the bottom of this, but they need to be investigated. We need to find out the extent to which they have been signing up individuals without their knowledge. This has wasted tens of billions of dollars because the insurance companies have been committing these kinds of shenanigans because of what the Democrats did 3 years ago. So here we are in a circumstance where those subsidies for anybody who is making over 4 times the poverty rate are going to go away. But that is not why their insurance rates are going up. Their insurance rates are going up because the insurance companies are increasing premiums as much as 25%, while the healthcare inflation is right around 7%. So I guess what you could say is that the Democrats have raised an issue or exposed an issue that we absolutely have to get to the bottom of. But the answer isn't just continuing the fraud. The answer isn't continuing to allow these insurance companies to rake in billions of dollars fraudulently and to be making this money off of people that they're not even actually providing services to. So that is, I think, what this is exposed the abject failure of Obamacare and the fact that we need to find a way to provide more we need to get more insurance companies in the market. We need to provide more competition. We need to provide for high deductible insurance policies so that people can have what we used to call high risk insurance, which is what I bought for years because it made sense financially for me to do so. But Obamacare did away with those kinds of policies. We need to come up with a different way of providing insurance and health care to our citizens.
So under the shutdown deal, there is going to be a standalone vote on health care subsidies in December in the Senate, though it doesn't really sound like the leadership of the House is too keen on that idea. Representative Hageman, do you see people coming to the table here in Congress to talk about these problems and to try to map out some solutions, or do you anticipate this just being another tug of war over the same subsidy issue? What do you see ahead for this?
Well, we have to come to the table, Sarah. It's absolutely imperative that we talk about this and try to find a way to fix this. I don't want people's insurance rates to go up. I don't want them to have to be spending the kind of money that you're talking about. We have people reaching out to us, and we're trying to find solutions for this. I have people reaching out to me saying, I'm going to have to give up insurance entirely because I can't afford $60,000 a year. I've got people telling me that their insurance rates might be as much as $5,000 a month. Well, that's more than you spend on a mortgage. $5,000 a month is $60,000 a year. I have never come even close to using $60,000 a year worth of health care, and I think that that's probably the vast majority of people. How did we get to this position? We got to this position because the underlying program was absolutely broken because of Obamacare. But we have to come to the table to be talking about these things. Simply continuing the subsidies and continuing the fraud associated with this program doesn't provide a solution, Sarah. We could actually continue the subsidies tomorrow. People are still going to see substantial increases in their insurance rates because the insurance companies are increasing the rates, despite the fact that the inflation for healthcare is not nearly what they're spiking the rates for.
Yeah, it is absolutely a really complicated problem, but I think you really cut to the heart of the issue here, and I think folks here back home, we've experienced some hardships through this shutdown. There are, families, federal workers who haven't been paid, there, SNAP benefits. There are all kinds of issues that people are feeling on the ground here. And ultimately, I think that we hope that we get something in return and that there's some motivation, from some of our congressional leaders who've really dug their heels in here, that they'll come to the table in earnest and start working on some of these underlying problems. So I appreciate you clarifying what's really going on for folks here at home.
I absolutely want to come to the table and start finding solutions for this. And one of the problems that we've had, though, Sarah, is every time that we discuss this, every time we discuss that we need to fix Obamacare, the reaction from the Democrats is that we're trying to throw grandma off the cliff, that we're trying to destroy everybody's health care. We're not. That isn't what our motivation is. I, like everybody, I'm on Obamacare. By law, I am required to be on Obamacare. I pay for my health insurance. A lot of people think that that's one of the things that you get as a member of Congress. You don't. I pay for my own health care, and I know that my premiums are going to be skyrocketing as well. This affects us too. So I want to find a solution to this. But again, throwing good money after bad isn't the solution. Paying the insurance companies even more money so that they can make even higher profits, that's also not the solution.
Yes. Well, I absolutely agree with you on that note. Now, I wanted to kind of turn our attention a little bit here. There's obviously so much reporting and so much going on with the shutdown. But, in the meantime, I know that you and your colleagues have been hard at work on meaningful legislation that will have a real impact here on the ground. And one of those is a bipartisan bill that you've reintroduced here that's really aimed at strengthening economic opportunity on our nation's reservations. It's called the Long-Term Leasing Act, and it has to do with lifting kind of a cap on leases on reservation land that is hopeful to kind of spur economic development there. So currently, I think the cap is 25 years, and if you're an entrepreneur, I think it makes it a little bit tough to make major investments when it's uncertain about how long you're going to be able to be on the ground there. Tell us what this bill's all about, Representative Hageman.
So I'm very excited about this, and I learned this when I first went into Congress. There's so much that you learn about what's going on out there that you're like, what in the world? Why would you do that? That seems so crazy. But right now, for Indian trust land, for land that's held in trust for our Indian tribes, they are, with certain exceptions, they are limited at leasing that property to 25 years. So as you say, if you're an entrepreneur or a businessman or a businesswoman, are you willing to construct, say, a convenience store or a grocery store or something like that on tribal land if you're only going to be able to get a 25-year lease? And the answer oftentimes is no. Even banks won't necessarily loan you the financing to be able to do that because they recognize that it's kind of a precarious situation. I also think that it is incredibly, I guess, paternalistic of us to try to prevent or limit what our tribal members can do with their own property in terms of being able to enter into lease agreements. So I introduced a bill that would extend that to 99 years. So if the Northern Arapaho tribe or the Eastern Shoshone tribe wanted to lease property for 50 years or 60 years or 47 years, then under my bill they would be able to do so and enter into these long-term agreements with people who would then be coming in and engaging in the kind of economic development that they need. When I was chairman of the subcommittee on Indian and Insular Affairs, one of the big issues that we addressed was economic opportunity and economic development for our tribes across the country. This is just kind of a continuation of that. I believe that the tribes and the tribal members are the ones that know best of how to manage their property and what is in their best interest. I think Congress needs to get out of the way on these kinds of things and make sure that they have the wherewithal and the tools to do what is the best interest of the people who live there.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. Here in Wyoming on the Wind River Reservation, we've got a number of entities that have gotten some really big grant awards that are aimed at development. So, we are seeing some progress made there. And always, I think the hope is that when we make those kinds of investments, that will spur more development. So I think we're really poised to see some growth on the reservation here. And I think that this bill will really help make that happen.
It has in other areas. So under the current plan, if you were the Eastern Shoshone, you would actually have to come to Congress and seek permission to lease your land for, say, 75 years. And we've had other tribes come in and testify before our committee seeking the authority to extend the time for leasing of the property. We had one tribe come in, and they were seeking to be able to lease their property for, I think, 75 years. They were looking at a distillery or something like that. And their petition had been pending for 22 years.
Wow.
That's how slow Congress is in responding to these requests. So their petition itself had been pending before Congress for 22 years. I don't want to do that anymore. I want them to be able to go in and negotiate and enter into these contracts on their timeline, not Congress's timeline.
Yeah, I think we agree with you on that one, Representative Hageman, and are hopeful that you can take this common sense approach and get it through across the finish line here. I know a lot of folks here in Wyoming, and ranchers in particular, have taken note of an announcement that President Donald Trump made here directing the Department of Justice to investigate the meat packing companies, amid accusations of price fixing and manipulation. Can you tell us what's going on with this issue?
So, as most people in the ag industry know, there are only 4 large packers. Now, there are smaller regional packers, but they don't have the capacity to do what we need in terms of processing meat in this country to meet the demand. So there are 4 big packers, and 3 of them are owned by other countries, 2 by Brazil and 1 by China. So that is where our bottleneck is in the cattle industry for processing beef. And they have largely been setting the market for years and years and years, which has impacted the ability of our ranchers and our cattle producers to thrive the way that they should. So there has often been accusations made of various antitrust actions being taken, concerns about collusion, concerns about a variety of things related to these packers and how they operate. And so what the president has said, and this has been a request that has been out there for a long time, which is we need to be investigating these huge conglomerates for, all different kinds of things, whether they are engaging in bad practices, whether they are, some of the issues associated with my bill, the MCOOL bill, making sure that we can identify meat that's actually produced in the United States versus bringing meat in and then labeling it as being made in the U.S. So this is just part of that broader effort to finally get some relief for our cattle industry by looking at what is going on behind the scenes with the packers that control such a huge part of the market.
Yeah, you mentioned the McCool bill. That's definitely one that we're keeping an eye on here too. That's the Country of Origin Labeling Enforcement Act. What can you tell us about the background of that? I think a lot of us, we want to buy local. We don't want to support our local ranchers, but in the very least, we want to buy American beef. What can you tell us about this topic?
So that's been the challenge, that if you bring in meat from other countries, if you repackage it here, you can claim that it is American made. And that is a truth in labeling issue that I think needs to be addressed, and that's what my bill does. So we have to make sure that people know where the products are coming from, and that's the mandatory country of origin labeling bill would do that. And this is something that we have been pursuing for years. There was a period of time that we had an MCOOL in effect up until 2014 when the World Trade Organization stepped in and said that that was a violation of a variety of international trade laws. So that's one of the battles that we're going to have over this, and I recognize that. But just as you said earlier, we all need to sit down at the table and work through these issues rather than just running away from them. We need to be able to address these things head on so that we can make sure that the consumer who is going into the grocery store, they may decide to pay less money for a cut from Argentina or something like that. That's their choice, but they ought to know where it's coming from. In addition to which, our cattle producers are the top in the world in terms of animal husbandry, in terms of how they maintain their herds and how they treat them. And they ought to be able to make sure that people know that when that beef is there in the grocery store, that they can be confident in how it was raised and taken care of.
Well, we definitely support that. I think we want to know exactly where our beef is coming from, and especially in a state that's so heavily invested in it, we want to put our money where our mouths are, literally. And I think this bill is going to bring us forward to that. I wanted to, thank you, especially this month, Representative Hageman, for carving out some time here this morning to check in with us here at home during such a busy time as you gather with your colleagues in the House of Representatives to end this shutdown today. So thank you so much.
Sarah, I'm so looking forward to this. We need to pay our federal employees. We need to pay our military personnel. I am really looking forward to going in there and supporting the folks who have been working without paychecks, the folks who have continued to provide services to the American people. I'm very proud of the work that they've done. I'm proud of my own staff and the work that they've done. They've all continued working during this, and I appreciate everyone who's been willing to stay on the line and do what we need to do to provide services to the American people.
Absolutely. Well, we join you in that measure of gratefulness for the folks who've really stepped up to the plate during this tough time. And as always, thank you so much for the work you're doing on behalf of us here in Wyoming.
Thank you, Sarah. Talk to you soon.
All righty. Thanks.